Episode 4. I'm going to make a disclaimer right at the beginning here. I do not sit here as somebody who got everything right. Far from it. I sit here as somebody who spent over 2 decades inside this world and underwent 13 hair transplant procedures, trying to understand something I probably was not emotionally ready to understand at the beginning. And that matters because experience is not just knowledge. Sometimes experience is accumulated consequence. There were points in my own journey where I genuinely believed the next procedure would finally quiet the noise in my head, not because I was chasing perfection, not because I was vain, but because, like most people dealing with hair loss, I just wanted to feel comfortable being myself again. That is the part people outside this world rarely understand. Most people are not chasing celebrity hairlines. They are chasing relief, relief from constantly thinking about it, relief from analyzing photographs, relief from negotiating with mirrors, lighting, angles, wind, cameras, wet hair, relief from the exhaustion of no longer feeling fully comfortable as yourself. And hair loss is strange psychologically because it happens slowly enough for denial to survive. You adapt, you compensate, you convince yourself it is probably stabilizing. I remember telling myself it's not that bad. Nobody notices. Maybe it'll stop here. Meanwhile, I was thinking about it every single day, and that contradiction becomes exhausting because eventually people stop making decisions from clarity. They start making them from emotional fatigue. That is when vulnerability enters the room. 3 in the morning, bathroom mirror, wet hair, phone torch, pulling the hairline forward under harsh light, hoping somehow it looked different than yesterday. Most sufferers know that moment. And once fear enters, urgency usually follows close behind. Suddenly, every advert feels personal. Every clinic promises reassurance. Every before and after starts looking less like information and more like escape. That is where people become vulnerable. Some rush into surgery far too early. Others wait until the emotional weight becomes unbearable. Confidence drops, identity shifts, relationships suffer. Then surgery becomes less about strategy and more about desperation. Neither place is healthy because surgery cannot repair panic, and it cannot heal years of emotional confusion overnight either. I learned that the hard way. There are procedures I look back on now and realize I was not really chasing hair, I was chasing certainty. I thought if I could just fix the visible problem, somehow it would fix everything else too, my confidence, my insecurities, my overthinking, my relationship with myself, far from it. And looking back honestly, one of the biggest flaws throughout my own journey was obsession. I have always had a very obsessive personality. In some areas of life, that can become a superpower: drive, focus, persistence. But when obsession attaches itself to fear or insecurity, it becomes destructive. And I can say openly now that the amount of negative focus I placed onto my hair loss for years served almost no positive purpose whatsoever. It did not give me clarity. It did not give me peace. If anything, it robbed me of perspective. Because when somebody becomes consumed by trying to fix themselves, eventually they stop living properly in the present altogether. Everything becomes conditional. I'll feel better when, I'll be more confident when, I'll finally relax when. That is a very dangerous psychological place to live from because hair loss may affect confidence, but obsession slowly affects your entire relationship with life itself. And honestly, I think many people listening to this will quietly recognize parts of themselves in that because the real battle with hair loss is rarely just physical, it becomes psychological, identity based, emotional, especially for men who have never really been taught how to process vulnerability in the first place. And unfortunately, this industry understands fear very well. What people want is clarity. What many businesses sell is urgency. Are most people's mistakes. One rushed decision often creates the next. The donor area is not just hair, it is finite capital. And when finite resources are spent emotionally instead of strategically, consequences eventually arrive that no consultation brochure prepares people for. I have spoken privately with patients after things went wrong, not just physically wrong, psychologically wrong. Men who technically had successful surgery, but still felt anxious every morning because the relationship with themselves had never actually healed underneath it all. That is why emotional readiness matters far more than this industry likes to discuss. Sometimes the most mature decision is not rushing into treatment. Sometimes it is slowing down long enough to think clearly again. And I know that sounds strange coming from somebody who has had 13 procedures, but maybe that is exactly why I can say it honestly. Because eventually, experience humbles you. You realize there is no finish line with hair loss, only management, planning, acceptance, adaptation. And strangely enough, peace of mind often begins the moment people stop chasing the illusion of total control. There are exceptional surgeons doing incredible work around the world. Hair transplantation can absolutely change lives positively when approached correctly. But good surgery still cannot protect someone from poor long-term thinking. That responsibility still sits with the individual. And that is why this platform exists, not to rush people into surgery, not to scare people away from it, but to help people slow down enough to make decisions from clarity instead of fear. Because one day your future self will either thank you for slowing down or quietly wish you had. And honestly, that is exactly why the Hair Loss Lab was created, not as another platform adding noise, not as another place pushing panic, pressure, perfection, or a particular narrative, but hopefully as a place where people can gain perspective, a place where people can feel understood, better informed, less isolated, and ultimately more emotionally equipped to make decisions they can genuinely live with long term. Because the more informed you become, the harder you are to manipulate. And if even one person listening to this slows down, thinks more clearly, avoids a rushed decision, or simply feels a little less alone in what they are experiencing, then these conversations have served a real purpose. Hair loss changes appearance, but fear changes behavior. And unfortunately, there are entire industries built around understanding exactly how vulnerable people think when they are afraid, and the hair loss industry is no exception. This is what we're going to explore next. I hope you have found this episode of use. This is the Hair Loss Lab podcast. I'm Spencer Stevenson, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.